Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity webinar series. NCORE is part of the Southwest Center for Human Relations Studies at the University of Oklahoma in Norman, Oklahoma. My name is Dedrick K. Perkins, and I use any and all pronouns. I am the Senior Program Coordinator, and I am delighted to welcome you and be your host this afternoon. We hope that we continue the conference tradition of working to improve racial, ethnic, and intercultural relations on college campuses and community organizations by providing virtual learning with opportunities like this one. I wanted to introduce something new to you all. So in preparation for NCORE 2024, we are offering a conference-based webinar series called Setting Our Compass. This will be a webinar and it's 7-part series, and it's to prelude the NCORE 2024 in Honolulu, Hawaii. The series is designed to provide attendees with a rich historical and contemporary context, setting the stage for meaningful engagement at the conference while we're in Honolulu. The Setting Our Compass webinar series is your compass guiding you toward a rewarding NCORE 2024 experience. So join us as we set the course for a journey of learning, growth, and connection. The first of the 7-part series will happen on Thursday, March 7th, 2024 at 11 a.m. Hawaii Standard Time and 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. But welcome to our webinar series today. This is our regular monthly series, and it happens on the first and last Wednesday of each month, with the occasional exceptions like holidays. Some webinars are free and others are offered at a modest fee of $25. Our next webinar is entitled Don't Forget to Breathe, Boundaries, Reflect, Evaluate, Acknowledge, Thankfulness, Heal, and Energize. And that will be broadcast on Wednesday, March 6, 2024. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. If you need to utilize closed captioning, make sure your settings are set to on. Always remain muted unless you're requested to unmute. We ask that your background not have any moving images or flashing lights. And if you have any specific tech, accessibility, or any other operational concerns, contact me via direct message. I'm the session host. The presenter will take questions periodically during the session as part of the interactive piece of it, but please hold any questions that you have until the end and place them in the Q&A box where we will facilitate the Q&A session. Today, our featured presenter is T. Brown. T. Brown uses they, them pronouns, and they are the program manager of culture and climate of Equitas Health and the owner of Black Like Magic Divination LLC. He is a trusted advocate for change within and outside their organization. They have dedicated time to building authentic connections with the communities they are part of and interact with regularly. He creates programming focused on helping employees to feel heard, uplifted, educated, and encouraged. Their work is rooted in the ideologies of community care and transformative justice to reinvent a culture of trust and respect. T is a parent, a writer, and a tarot reader in other dimensions of their life. They will be presenting on divine healing for organizers, building spiritual practice with tarot. Welcome, T. Brown.
Thank you so much, Cedric, for that warm welcome and introduction. I'm going to share my screen. All right. So thank you so much, everyone, for welcoming me today and this platform. My name is T. Brown. Again, I use they, them pronouns. I am the program manager of culture and climate at Equitas Health and the owner of Black Like Magic Divination, which is my tarot and divination business. So before we get started today, I want to offer this land acknowledgement. So I'm located in what is called Ohio. So I begin today's presentation by honoring the people and acknowledging the traditional homeland of the Lenape or Delaware, Shawnee, Wyandot, Miami, Ottawa, Potawatomi, other Great Lakes tribes, including the Chippewa, Kickapoo, Wea, uh, Piankashaw and Kaskaskia, and all original inhabitants and ancestral owners of the region in Ohio where I currently reside. I also acknowledge the thousands of Native Americans who now call Ohio home. I recognize the unique and enduring relationship between Indigenous people and their traditional territories that were taken away through genocide, ethnic cleansing, and forced removal. To those people and places that we do not know due to displacement and denial of an official designation, we honor you. I encourage you all to show solidarity with Indigenous folks in the following ways. Learn the names of nations and tribes that originally inhabited the land where you currently live and work. Prioritize hiring and collaborating with folks from Indigenous communities. Um, I work in public health, and so amplifying the voices of Indigenous folks making contributions to our field. Um, Redistributing resources, and of course, returning land. So for the presentation today, our learning objectives are that by the end of the session, you will gain a foundational knowledge of tarot history and the tarot deck. You will examine the value of spiritual practice and how it can contribute to wellness. You will learn to create tarot spreads focused on self-empowerment. And we will explore how to weave spirituality into self-care and community care. So some disclaimers up top. So tarot is a tool and should be treated for entertainment purposes only. Both your interpretations and mine are to be treated as if a friend is giving advice and not the prescription of a professional. I think that's really important. That like as much as I can believe in tarot, it is not. I'm not giving the advice of a professional. Um, and I would not recommend tarot for making medical decisions, and those are not readings that I engage with at all. This presentation will be an introduction to tarot, but it will not prepare you to read for others. I encourage you to continue your learning, or you can contact me to consider how you may expand your knowledge. All right. So here's me. So my name's T. I have been reading tarot for almost a decade and using other divination tools for about as long. I found tarot at a time when I was really lost, and it has been a helpful and occasionally aggressive, assertive guide for me ever since. I am an abolitionist community organizer, and I believe in community care above all. It is kind of the basis of everything I do. I am centered in community. I am grounded in community. I am in love with my community, right? um, my politics, my spiritual practice, and my work are all in alignment. I believe in using divination for healing, finding community, and the type of accountability love provides. So for this first part of this presentation, I want to talk a little bit about spirituality and movement work and really like sell you on this idea of why it's important, why this is relevant to not just NCORE, but to like organizing work, right? So first I have the personal is political. When I say that the personal is political, I'm speaking about how the choices we make in our lives can have large scale impact as much as that large scale has an impact on the individual. We are in a constant feedback loop with the broader political landscape. Nothing we do exists in a vacuum, and the decisions that we make are informed by the world around us. Often, the messaging we receive is that we should be individualists, that we should strive to constantly move towards the top, and that we are only as valuable as what we produce. In my opinion, right, that does not leave much space for the acts of self and community care that are crucial to survival. So, throughout this presentation, I'm going to encourage you to think about how your individual choices impact your communities and how you can allow yourself to be shaped by the community around you. I also encourage you to consider that the decision to engage in spirituality, no matter what that looks like for you, is informed by the world around us. When we make a conscious decision to add the layer of spirituality to our lives, we open ourselves and our communities up for change in both our dream space and our reality. The decisions that we make as individuals, the decisions to say, I'm going to take this time for me, I'm going to pour into my community in this particular way, is a political act, especially in a world and a society that is telling us that we don't have time for it, or that it's not necessary. So, what does spirituality have to offer our movements? So often we cast aside our connection to spirituality as secondary to the immediate movement. Those of you who are in movement work kind of know this, like the immediate moment is kind of all that tends to matter, right? Taking time alone to focus on self improvement can be considered frivolous, unnecessary, or something that we do later. We are often modeling really unhealthy practices in our work as seasoned organizers and for those coming into the movement. We spend so much time determined to die for the movement, to martyr ourselves. Or we choose not to die, but to throw our whole lives into the hard work of organizing, and we miss opportunities for connection and visibility and to just enjoy and see the rest of the world. I would say that it's really imperative that we remove this narrative. We cannot just simply live or die for the movement. There has to be more to it. Um, I would argue that spiritual movements have never existed without a politic of love, of care, of spirituality. And we're going to get into a little bit of that history in a minute. What I also want to say here is that we have this understanding that spirituality on the right has been weaponized and used against many of us who have multiply marginalized identities. Those of us who, like myself, who are trans, who are fall anywhere under the LGBTQIA umbrella. Many of us have religious trauma, and I would be remiss not to mention that spirituality has been weaponized and used against us, and many of us may have abandoned spirituality because of this. Um, I would implore folks to find a piece of spirituality that works best for them. It doesn't have to be traditional religion or it doesn't have to be tarot. It can be whatever feels right, but to add in that layer, because uh, opposition doesn't get to have everything, right? But I do want to note that we are especially living in a time where we're seeing anti-trans legislation. We are seeing um, anti-queer legislation. We are seeing a lot of harm being done in our communities in the name of spirituality. And I don't want that to discourage us from accessing what is also rightfully ours to access in whatever way that looks best for you. Okay. So, what does spirituality have to teach us? So, the first is that we are part of a long ancestral tradition. Spirituality has always, always, always existed in our freedom movements. The original slavery abolitionists used church and spirituality to their advantage. So, plots were devised in sacred spaces as they were often the only private spaces. Worship was adapted to combine African spirituality with the Christianity of the slavocracy. Spirituality was a weapon used to justify slavery. And what I think was really powerful to learn, I have a book called Abolition and Spirituality that I get a lot of this text from, but it goes deeper into that the enslaved abolitionist worked to really say, like, no, we're not going to accept this narrative that this is justifiable. Right. Henry Highland Garnet was a fugitive slave and minister, and he made a speech at the 1843 National Convention of Colored Citizens, essentially saying that it was a moral and faith-based decision to fight against slavery rather than accept things as they are, which was against the grain at the time, where folks were told that your lot in life was a message from a divine being and you would only see freedom in heaven, and you just had to accept your lot. And what Henry Highland Garnet was saying was that that's not acceptable. Not only do you need to make this decision to fight against um, your circumstances, but that he said that you will not see the kingdom of heaven otherwise. And I think that that is a really important statement to say, here is our spirituality, here is something that means something to us, and let it motivate you, let it activate you into change. Um, so it's nice to know that in our movements, there's always been this history of taking what matters to folks and using it to move them into action. Spirituality also teaches us to focus on what you want more of. Um, I think about it in terms, I have a 12-year-old, and in parenting, I think focus on what I want more of. I don't punish the behavior I want to see, right? And so when I say I want to see this change, I want to see a particular world I want to live in, I want to see a particular behavior out of my child, I'm going to focus on it, I'm going to encourage it. For those of you who are familiar with manifestation or that kind of language, the root of that is to say, I'm going to dedicate my time and my energy to the things I want rather than giving it to the things that I don't want, and then see what rewards I'm able to reap there. Spirituality also teaches us that there is power in the collective. There is so much power when we are together. It is not about critical mass and accruing the most people, right? Um, the power in the collective is about creating valuable, authentic connections with each other, right? Profound things happen to us when we are moving together authentically, whether that's with two people or 200. Kind of building off of that is that we must build faith in one another. So often, organizing communities, we kind of come together, we're told we immediately have to trust each other, and then that trust deteriorates because we haven't spent that time building authentic connections and building faith in one another. But um, a metaphor I like to use here in this faith is about how to take breaks and to trust each other. Um, Organizing will chew you up and spit you out, right? You'll come in hot and heavy, you'll be ready to go, and then it's traumatizing work. And we feel like if we're not going to do it, who else is going to do it? And building faith in one another, I like to use the metaphor of a choir. So choirs can hold impossibly long notes, right? And the way they do that isn't that everybody in that choir is holding the same note for the same length of time. It's that everybody's singing the note, and then when your voice tires, you can drop out and recover, and the choir will carry on that note, right? And then it is still your responsibility to rejoin when you're ready, right? But you are allowed to take that break and trust that the music will carry on and that you can hold the note when somebody else needs to take a break. And I've loved that metaphor since I first heard it because I think that so often we refuse to make ourselves disposable. We refuse to pour into ourselves, and we do movements a disservice when we don't take that break, when we don't trust that other people will do that same work. Spirituality also teaches us that we are surrounded in abundance. So you may be familiar with the phrase scarcity is a myth. And I would argue that that's not the whole truth. Scarcity is both a myth and very real, right? Even if it's manufactured scarcity. However, what we can do is remove ourselves from that scarcity mindset and remember that there is so much joy and love and care and trust around us that we can tap into all the abundance around us, that there is enough for everybody, there is enough space for everybody in the movement, that there is a role for everyone in the movement, and that we can take care of each other with what we have, rather than thinking about what we lack, right? So my favorite thing that spirituality teaches us is this next bullet point, which is that we must lead prayerful lives. So let's talk about prayer. So this interpretation of prayer comes from the essay "A Prayer for Abolition" by Reverend Jason Leiden. Um, Reverend Leiden is actually a non-theist, and he quotes another Unitarian minister, John Haynes Holmes, who says, "Prayer is attention unfolding into intention. That if our prayers are to be answered, we must answer them ourselves. That we are already answering our prayers in the mere expression of the desire that they be fulfilled." The first time I read this, it had such a profound impact on me. This idea that prayer is about connecting our dreams to our actions. It is not sitting and being passive and asking someone else to solve our problems. It is saying that I have a dream, I have this vision of a world I want to live in. And in order for that world to be realized, I need to build it myself. I need to be in community, and we need to build the world that we are talking about, right? This idea that, um, when I say we must lead prayerful lives, we must lead lives that are steeped with intention, lives that are always moving forward collectively towards the shared vision of a better future, right? I like the idea that we are answering our own prayers with every bit of work that gets us closer to that world we want to live in. And finally, I don't know how many folks have read Rest is Resistance, or engaged with the NAP ministry, but it has had a pretty profound impact in the way that I move. But spirituality teaches us that we must center rest, that rest, whatever that looks like, whether it's closing your eyes for 10 minutes a day, whether it is journaling, taking a nap, coloring, whatever it looks like, we must center rest, because in a world that is constantly telling us that we have to produce, we have to do more, um, rest has to be a critical point so that we can recharge our dream space, that we can explore new worlds and new possibilities, and that we can show up feeling rested and whole. So that is um, that. I do see the ask to put the quotation about prayer in the chat, and I will do that in a little bit. Maybe, I don't know if I can copy, but it is a beautiful quote. It's from Spirituality and Abolition in the essay "A Prayer for Abolition." All right. So now that I feel like I've effectively sold you on spirituality, let's talk tarot. So this next section will be really like kind of going into the logistics of tarot. So what is divination, right? I have it in the name of my business. It's like, a word you might hear a lot. And this definition is taken from the book African Divination Systems, Ways of Knowing. And divination is the attempt to gain insight into a question or situation by way of an occultic standardized process or ritual. Occultic here meaning having to do with the paranormal or supernatural. Divination can be things like tarot, of course, casting stones or casting bones, and seeing where they land and what the messages you get from that. Stichomancy or bibliomancy, which is using books or particularly the Bible. Shufflemancy, which is one of my favorites, to use music. Water divining, crystal balls, using playing cards, oracle cards, anything like that, are tools of divination. So I want to answer this question really quick here. A definition of spirituality, explain how spirituality and religion are different. So for me personally, this is just my personal definition. Spirituality is anything that allows me to tap into my inner being, my connection to a um, higher state, like I would say, like a collective world that makes me think about beyond anything beyond myself, but also is deeply personal, right? So spirituality to me looks like exploring my ancestry, looks like thinking about the supernatural things that can't be explained. And religion to me is can be more organized, more structured, and less individual to a person, and often comes with a set of rules and standards, whereas spirituality can just be about tapping into the unknown, and letting that be a unique experience for you. So the history of tarot, just a brief history. Um, So tarot originated in the 1400s. As far as we can understand, the history of tarot is really murky. Um, uh, it has roots both in Italy and France, but it is unconfirmed that it originated within Romani cultures, but there is immense overlap. I cannot overstate the role of tarot in Romani culture. It was and is a common tool for spiritual practice and business within Romani communities. Um, Fortune telling decks, you might see this also called cartomancy, which is using any kind of cards to like do fortune or future telling. They were popular parlor games for the wealthy at the time under the name Taroki and featured carnivalesque imagery. So very different imagery than what you might have seen in like a Rider-Waite-Smith deck as well. So the Rider-Waite-Smith deck is the kind of the revival deck that brought tarot kind of back into the mainstream consciousness in the early 1900s. So the Rider-Waite deck kind of had some like esoteric imagery, or not esoteric, had very like medieval imagery, or simple imagery. Sorry, I'm like tripping over my notes. So, Pamela Coleman Smith, who was a Black woman, and I feel it's always important to uplift, was hired in 1909 to illustrate the Rider-Waite deck. This popularized the medieval imagery we see in most decks today. The imagery before was just really simple, like the carnival imagery, or it just had like the names of the cards on it. This updated the imagery and language to be a little more esoteric, like changing from the card from the Pope to the Hierophant. And it contained more detailed designs. So traditionally, when we think about the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, this is what people think of when they think of a tarot deck. However, tarot is expanding and evolving with the people. Decks can look so many different ways. I personally own 3 of the decks on this screen. You can see all types of body representation. You'll see gender representation, people of color, sexuality. And I think this is really powerful, right? That tarot is as vast and varied as anything else, and you can find imagery that you connect with. I don't particularly, like in my personal practice, I have over 30 decks. And I do have a Rider-Waite-Smith deck, but it's not my go-to. And I needed to find, it was really important to me to find decks that had imagery that I could connect with that reflected my experiences. And I'm lucky that we live in a time and I have access to stores and online places that can showcase these kind of decks. So if you're thinking about getting a deck or you're struggling to connect with a deck, know that there are so many different options out there, and that tarot continues to evolve to be inclusive in those ways. And these decks are the Fat Folks Tarot, the Queer Tarot, the Black Tarot, and Tarot of the Sacred Sisterhood. All right. So before we get into the deck composition and how a deck is broken out, I want to talk about some like common myths and misconceptions about tarot. The first is that tarot is only for future or fortune telling, right? You're going to get a deck and you're going to ask it like, what does my week look like? Or what's ahead for me? And those are valid questions, but that's not the only thing tarot can be used for. My company like slogan, I suppose, is tarot and divination for introspection and healing, right? Typically my readings are focused on what do I need to know right now? What can I learn? What kind of insights can I gain? How can I move forward? Tarot can be great for introspection and navigating different conflicts and different moments and just providing that additional insight as opposed to just looking ahead. The second is that you must be a psychic to read tarot, which I think is always really interesting. This and the third point, I think, really go together, the idea that tarot cards are portals or other forms of magic. You don't have to believe in anything mystical to use a tarot deck, right? Um, I always tell people I don't quite know how it works. I just know it does. I don't miss, But for me, I think that you can be completely secular and use tarot cards. A deck has 78 cards and they all have a particular meaning, and those meanings cover a vast amount of emotions and experiences, and you can just use them, read from the book, and still give a great reading. Um, and I personally don't believe that tarot cards are portals or evil or anything like that. They've been a really helpful tool, and you don't have to believe any of those things to just enjoy a deck. And then the last one of the most enduring myths about tarot is this idea that your first deck must be a gift. You could be waiting forever for your first deck if this were true. I encourage you, if you can't get it as a gift, to go out and explore, do your research on a deck, and find one that works for you and go buy it yourself. You can always be gifted one later, but it's not going to change your relationship to the deck or if it's going to be effective if you buy it yourself. Like I mentioned, I have over 30 decks, and I have bought probably 80% of them myself. So you can get started at any time. All right. So let's talk about how a deck is set up. So there are 78 cards in a tarot deck, and they're divided into two portions, the major arcana and the minor arcana. The major arcana is the first 22 cards. They start at 0 with the Fool and end at 21 with the World. You might also hear this called the Fool's Journey, because we start at 0 with the Fool, and then they meet all of these characters and have all these experiences. And then they close out their journey with the World and are ready to start over and be the Fool all over again. And that's a great way to conceptualize the majors, those first 22 cards. The last 56 cards are the minors. They are in 4 suits like a playing card deck. They are the Swords, Cups, Pentacles, and Wands. And those get a little more into the details. Whereas the majors are kind of a big overview, the minors are much more like specific. So everything from here on out is my interpretation of things. These are not hard and fast rules. These are the keywords that I use when I'm doing my readings. So the Swords, Cups, Pentacles, and Wands are suits. and they each have an element associated with them. So, swords, I say, are the suits of our ideas, our actions, our motivations, and they're associated with air. You might see like bird imagery in a lot of tarot card decks, anything to kind of show that like motion of air. Cups are the suit of our emotions, our interpersonal relationships, love, romance, and they're associated with water. Pentacles are the suit of the material world. You might see things like career, money, your house, stability kind of associated with pentacles. And this is associated with earth. And then wands are the suit of our creativities, our passions, what direction we want to take. Less practical like the pentacles and more like up in the air, like thinking about it. So fire. Um, and I think the suits, the elements are a pretty cool association. I think that they, if you think about pentacles as being really grounded, you got the earth, wands, that passion, that fire, cups, water, our emotions live in that space, how much water holds, and then swords, like that swiftness of air. So these are just some quick keywords that really help me to think about the suits, and they really divide up the experience you're going to have and the way you're going to answer each question. So within the suits, you have 14 cards to a suit. So you have aces, you have your numerical cards, and your court cards in most decks. Sometimes decks will do something unique and change around like names, suit names and numbering and what the court cards mean. But for the most part, these are kind of a general rule. So aces are the first card in the suit. Aces come with a lot of potential and opportunity. They're kind of the epitome of the suit. So a lot of big energy there. The numerical cards are 2 through 10. And we're going to get into some general numerology in the next couple slides. But this really covers the ups and downs, right? These are more detailed and specific cards to those experiences and emotions. Court cards are the king, queen, knight, and page. Court cards, honestly, I'll be transparent. I've been reading for 10 years and I still struggle a bit with the court cards. They can, and it depends on how you want to read them. So they can represent actual people, archetypes, or traits to watch out for, to look for in others as you're getting insight on a situation. So again, this basic numerology is some associated with like the spiritual aspect of numbers, but these are also just like things that I use to remind myself of what like keywords I go to when I'm pulling cards and thinking about the themes between them. So these are going to vary from suit to suit, but for the most part, they follow similar themes. So ones are about like new beginnings, potential. These are your aces, right? So new beginnings, potential, any new emergences, illumination, learning something new. Twos are often about decision making. You'll have balance. You might be at a crossroads, unions, as well as conflicts, right? Threes are pretty solid. Threes are pretty good cards. Their creativity, teamwork, community, communication. Those are just some quick things to think about. You see a lot of collaboration in threes. Fours are about solid groundwork, reflection, authority, rest. Those are some big ones for our fours. So fives we often see fives kind of exist in a difficult space, right? We see conflict, change, power struggles, like refusing help, not a refusal to help, but like not engaging in help, right? Six, we have like peaceful communication, harmony, considerations of the past. Sevens are like unpredictability, planning, self-reflection, and sevens are where the magic lives. Sevens will get a little more uh very wooey, right? You might see some more like spirituality focused things in our sevens. Eights are about mastery, accomplishments, maybe some overwhelm, but also letting go. And then nines and tens, as we close out, nines are like wishes, meeting your goals, perseverance, right? Especially when you're thinking about what comes next, which is those tens and that completion, abundance, life cycles, kind of the culmination of knowledge. And I include this numerology in here because I think it's helpful, one, to develop your own keywords, but to also have a base in what is the association with these numbers? How can I go on what's already there so that I can think about how I'm going to interpret this reading. Then and also I think like the numbers in relation to each other are really important, like 9 and 10. If 10 is completion, 9 is almost there. And so that's going to factor into my reading, right? As I'm thinking about what's the next step before this comes. All right. Feel free to keep dropping questions in. I know I'm kind of covering a lot really quickly. But we're going to move into building a practice. So now that you've got like a baseline knowledge of tarot, you're like, what do I do with it? So the first thing to do is to know how to ask questions. And I often find when people sit down in front of me to get a tarot reading, they really struggle to find a question that like they're like, I just wanted to get a reading, or I have no idea how to ask what I'm trying to ask, right? So some tips that I have for asking good questions are to, one, keep them open-ended, focus on yourself and the impacts that they'll have on you, and focus on what you can control. So instead of asking like, what does my boss need to do differently? Or how can I convince my boss to let me do this? You can ask questions like, how can I improve my work circumstances? Or what can um, what what does the universe have for me is a great question, right? What do I need to hear right now? What what impact will this decision have on me? What if I make what two choices do I have, right? Asking those questions about you rather than focusing them on other people. Yes. Okay. So a couple questions about the numerology here. Someone asked, does the meaning of the numbers change with each culture around the world? I think that's definitely true that they do. I think that do your own research into your culture and what these numbers might mean, and develop your own language of like shorthand for reading tarot. And to find the meaning of the numbers, I'm not going to go through them again, but you can look up your own, but also this recording will be available. So definitely take some time to revisit that. And then I'll get to that first question at the end. All right. So we're going to do an activity. So I'd love for you all, I think we're gonna get some participation here. So we're going to practice interpreting a card. So the question that I've offered is, what do I need to hear right now? So you've asked this question, what do I need to hear right now? And the card that we pulled is the Judgment card. So on this card, we have a black femme angel in a pink top who is playing saxophone with clouds coming out of it while floating above two femmes who are nude, one with long hair and one short. The one with short hair has a ribbon wrapped around their body. The word judgment is displayed in Portuguese at the top with the Roman numeral for 20 on the bottom. So if you were to read this intuitively, not knowing necessarily what the card means, just by the imagery, what would be your interpretation? And I think this is where folks can raise their hand or utilize the chat. All right, lots of great stuff coming through in the chat. So we have live life freely. 20 seems to suggest completion, fulfillment, liberation, delight, joy, free expression, creativity. Spend more time in the moment, enjoying what's around. It's time to think about your calling and what brings you joy. These are great. I don't remember what 20 means. So I didn't go over 20. So, but if we think about something that might be helpful when we're thinking about that numerology piece is, or just numbers in general, is that there are 21 is the last card in the majors. And so 20 comes right before that. So maybe thinking about what that right before means, that right before that completion. Lose yourself in what most expands your heart. Ooh. Numerology of 2, balance and decisions. Because it's near 21, you have all the info you need to make an informed decision at an important life junction. Great. Dance, surrender to devotion, heed the call. Oh, y'all are coming in. Thank you so much for all of these. Don't judge others, reflection and feeling into something, suspend judgment, celebrate what you have with gratitude. 3 folks in the card, so community and freedom. Those are, I love the incorporation of the numerology and these ideas and like the imagery. And then an affirmation for Vanessa on suspending judgment. These are all really wonderful. And I see the stirrings of your soul is calling. So feel free to keep sending them in. But the really beautiful thing about all of these interpretations is that they could all be correct, right? It depends on your interpretation of the card, right? Judgment has a traditional definition. All of the cards have a traditional definition, but your relationship to the imagery and to that card in particular, maybe the numbers, whatever you've previously learned or felt about this language, all of that's going to play into your interpretation of this card and how you give that back to your querent or the person asking the question. So if you'll allow me, I'll share my interpretation of the card, which is just one of many. So you need to be kinder to yourself. The way you view yourself is harmful and holding you back. Begin to sing your own praises. Lift yourself up into the light and be excited about what you see. Release yourself from the expectations you have set upon yourself. See what awaits you when you speak kindness to yourself rather than criticism. I love this card. I maybe chose it because I think that a lot of folks can hear this message. But my interpretation of this card is really drawn from one, understanding that judgment is about releasing judgment of yourself before you can move into the full acceptance of the end of your journey, right? But also, I see so much joy in this card, right? There is so much like release and freedom that you can step into if you release yourself from those judgments that you have of yourself and where you can what what you can move forward into, right? um and I think that this is really exciting, right? To be able to see a card and know that I hope what I hope you can take from this is that you can pick up a deck and you can begin to intuitively read without having to sit down and memorize 78 cards, right? You can just start to read intuitively and then get back to the book, right? Like I think the book is still important and traditional knowledge is still important, but your own interpretations of readings are going to be just as impactful, if not more so, than just what the book says. All right. So now that we've practiced interpreting a card, let's talk about spreads. So spreads are, and if you don't want to use just one card, there are options to build a spread, which is laying out multiple cards, often to answer multiple questions. And each card is going to answer maybe a different question or a different facet of a question. So you can build your own spreads, or on the next slide, we'll talk about 3-card spreads. But when you're building a spread, first you want to determine the intentions of the spread. What are you trying to accomplish? What are you making a love spread? Are you making a career spread, right? What is it that you are trying to answer? And then formulate the questions that you want answered. Are you asking multiple questions about your career, what path you should take next, about the relationship, and if so, what pieces of the relationship do you want to dive into? If you're thinking about your healing journey, how many questions do you want in there? I have a healing journey spread that is 10 cards. On a good day. Sometimes I have more, but they can answer multiple questions. And you want to determine the shape of your spread, right? If well, I'm going to show you a spread that I've created, and it's in the shape of a tree because it's a growth spread. And that shape can, one, just be fun, right? But it can also help think about like that, how visuals are powerful, and thinking about how you're laying out your cards and what impact that's going to have for the person asking the question and for yourself. And then pay special attention to the positions of each card and how they will relate to each other. So cards that are right next to each other might answer similar questions, or they might answer parallel questions. So if it's like strengths and then weaknesses, right? Or if one's right above or below, right? Checking the positions of your cards is going to help deepen a reading as well, and how those cards will relate to each other. All right. So 3-card spreads are a great place to start. Um, you can do like a quick Google search and see all kinds of 3-card spreads. So this is a very abbreviated list, but we have things like past, present, future, situation, action, outcome, mind, body, spirit, option 1, option 2, and how to choose. And you could even put like option 1, how to choose, and option 2, if you want to do that here and think about like what's going to sit in the middle, right? Or something similar, person 1, person 2, and what their relationship is. So that placement is going to help think about like how you interpret your reading as well. All right. So going back to building a spread, this is one that I created. I made an Instagram challenge a few years ago when I was feeling really ambitious. And one of the spreads that came out of this was the growth tree. And I really wanted something that was focused on growth, that was centered to my mission of like tarot for introspection and healing. And I came up with this idea of a little tree. And we're all going to collectively pretend that this looks exactly like a tree. Um, but what I did with this is I thought about my questions and what imagery might be included in a tree reading, right? So I started at 1. These are the roots, what keeps me grounded, right? 2, what supports me. So that's like the trunk. 3, what protects me, the bark. And that helped me shape those initial questions, right? If I'm thinking about the tree imagery, I'm going to incorporate that and use that to inform the questions that I'm asking. And then 4, 5, and 6 are my branches, right? So what should I strive for in order to keep growing? How can I maintain my growth? And what do I need to thrive? So, um, this, I think about the positions, right? The roots down at the bottom, and how it all feeds into each other. And so when I'm laying the cards out, I'm going to lay one first and then two, three, and the reading is going to build on itself. And I want that visual for the person I'm reading for as well. All right. So that's like a simple way to create a spread. Um, I find that creating spreads is really fun, and I haven't done it in a while. I don't read with spreads as much anymore, but I always find creating them to be an act of like engaging with tarot when I'm not feeling like picking up my deck and doing an interpretation, but I still want to feel connected to it, to my practice. But also, it helps me think about how do I want to, what do I want to offer to my clients? How do I want to read for myself? How can I give myself a more in-depth reading if I need it, right? All right. So, um, some more participation, just a little question. I want to know, if and how are you currently centering care in your life? How are you taking care of yourselves right now? So feel free to utilize the chat there. I see taking magnesium. It's great. Somebody just told me to take magnesium recently. Uh, Body movement, reading, attending things that bring me joy, trying to establish a meditation routine in the mornings, daily walks with my dog, unpacking with friends, eating well, rest, and being in nature, daily meditation and weekly float therapy, prioritizing sleep and walks. Building in physical activity through climbing or dance fills my spirit with vitality. Sleeping 8 hours a night, prioritizing rest, breaks, and time in nature, daily walks, exercise, attending this program. I'm so happy. Walking therapy, my pets, not working through lunch, very healthy. I'm spending time doing nothing but listening to this webinar after an extremely stressful workday yesterday. I love that. Um, Daily meditation, tarot reading, learning about astrology, self-knowledge, and journaling. Um, First thing I do when I wake up in the morning is put me first, movement, dancing in the mirror, then work, even if it means a 5 a.m. wake up, me first always. I love that. Saying no more often, using my CPAP, living in the woods, being continuously connected to the mother. These are all really beautiful ways to center care. Some of them are very practical, some of them are spiritual, some of them are just like moving for the sake of moving and centering yourself. I think these are all really beautiful care practices. For folks who maybe struggled to think about how they're centering care, this isn't an indictment at all. It's just a reminder to think about how are you pouring into yourself, right? What are you taking time for, and how are you making you a priority in the midst of everything? So some things that I want to offer is tarot for self and community care. So what tarot for self-care can look like, set up a comfortable environment, right? Make it a whole thing when you're doing a tarot reading for yourself, right? Set up a comfortable space to read, get pillows, blankets, a cup of tea. I am a big fan of luxurious activities in the mundane, and you can just really lean in and say, "This is my me time, and I'm gonna sit. I'm gonna like." I used to close my door and I'd put on my music and I'd have my little cup of tea and I'd set up in bed or on the floor, and everybody knew they weren't allowed to bother me, right? And just setting up that environment to say, like, this is for me and I deserve comfort, even when I'm doing something maybe mundane at this point, right? Ask good questions, right? Ask questions about what you need right now, how you can recover, how you can heal, right? Ask questions focused on you, and how to pour back into you, as opposed to just always problem solving, always aiming for productivity and doing the most, right? And intuitive reading. This can help take some of the pressure off of learning everything there is to know about like a traditional tarot reading. Right. So look beyond those traditional definitions. What is the imagery telling you? Take time to sit with your deck, to learn about your deck, um, and build it. If this is something that's a priority to you, allow it to be a priority and let other people know, like, this is my me time, and I'm going to sit with my cards and I'm going to keep a journal. That was one of the ways I learned, right? Is I kept a journal. I would pull a card, I would write down what it meant to me, like the imagery brought out to me, and then I'd look at the book and I'd write the book definition, and that was part of how I learned how to read tarot. And it was a really cool thing I got to do. I I had much more time on my hands at 19 years old, but um, okay, and tarot for self-care can look like just making time to do a reading for yourself every day, doing setting up space to make um, an intentional space for your practice and building a spiritual practice in that way. So now that we've covered tarot for self-care, let's talk about community care. So with community care for me, by definition, is the idea that we cannot do everything alone, right? And that we can pour into our community and also ask our community to pour into us. And I think that's always a really cool, impactful space to be in. And so sometimes our community is going to need something that cannot be solved quickly or need some extra care. And some things that you can use tarot to kind of address that. So you can offer readings to the community, right? Again, this presentation doesn't prepare you to read for the community, but if you have other experience or you want to talk to me about it, of course, reach out. But if and when you're ready, do readings for others. Give them the gift of witnessing your spiritual practice, right? You can offer readings to others, but you also don't have to do that. Not everybody is comfortable reading for the community. Not everybody needs to read for the community. And so often it's like, okay, I've learned my cards and now I have to level up. And this just is just a reminder that it can be an option, but it doesn't have to be, there's not an escalator into what you have to do with your practice. Um, but also in that offering to the community, you can show them, just let people in on what you're doing and share your experience with tarot, and let them know it's an option for them too, right? Even if you're not reading for them, just showing them, like, this is something I make a priority for, and model that behavior of pouring back into yourself. So in conflict, So, community organizers never have conflict. So this is maybe silly, but right, occasionally conflict arises. And it can be, sometimes we can get really locked into our own stances. It's hard to see outside of the immediate conflict in the moment. And we can use tarot as a tool to provide initial insight or additional insight, right? Use tarot as an opportunity to pause and reflect on how you want to handle harm and how to move forward with care. So another big piece of my spiritual practice, of my personal practice in politics, is transformative justice. I believe that we are often quick to be punitive, and we perpetuate more harm when we just seek to punish each other. And um, I don't think tarot is going to cure all of it, but what tarot and spirituality can offer in those moments of conflict is an opportunity to step back and hold on and say, let me get some additional insight. Let me see what I might be missing. You know, you don't have to read for other people. You can just use it to reflect and say, man, I'm locked in this conflict. How can I help? Or to just say, like, I noticed that this group is really going through it. What additional insight can we give? How can I offer my assistance? What can tarot tell me that I haven't already considered? And allow yourself to slow down instead of just jumping into solutions. And I think that's a great lesson that spirituality can teach us in general is that sometimes we need to sleep on it. Sometimes we need to ask for advice from someone else. Sometimes we need to just step back and stay out of it, right? Sometimes it's the best thing we can offer is to stay out of it. And then community altars. So, um, community altars are a really beautiful thing that you can do and offer in a space. So think about what your community needs, and then you can build an altar space dedicated around a card and educate others on spending time with it in the altar space. So, um, I'm a community pride organizer. It's a grassroots pride here in Central Ohio. And we build an altar to trans loved ones who have passed and or been taken from us. And people are allowed to, I set up a tarot card. I think about what we want to center, whether that's temperance or strength or justice, whatever that looks like. I'm wearing my strength and justice earrings right now. But I think about what is the energy, what card do we need, and I set that in the middle of the altar, and then we build the altar space around it. And so all during Pride that day, folks can come and they can sit in the space. They can maybe leave something at the altar or never take something, but to leave something, or just sit there and ponder and think about what that card means to them, what strength they can take from that. And so community altars, I think, are a really beautiful space to have in general, because they're spaces that folks can come to reflect on. They can think about their spirituality, they can contribute, and it allows us to think about that greater connectivity that we have, as opposed to just thinking about an individualistic spiritual practice. Okay. So some other things, if you want to build a daily practice or like just build out that spiritual practice, some things you can do are daily draws. Daily draws are pulling a card maybe every morning or every evening. If you're pulling at the beginning of the day, you can ask, what do I need to know today, going into today? Or at the end of the day, what lessons can I take from my day? Right. You can use tarot for journaling assistance. I love to do this when I'm journaling. Sometimes I'm like, I don't know what my inner teenager thought at the time, and I'll pull some tarot cards to kind of get my brain jogging a bit. So you can use it in that practice. Um, you can create dedicated altars, not just those community altars, but you can create an altar for yourself and say, man, I'm having a really tough week. I think I need I think I need temperance on my altar today to think about how I'm going to mediate and balance all these conflicting emotions, you know, and you build an altar space with your crystals and your cards and your candles, you know. For intention setting, I debated on pulling a card at the beginning of this session to kind of set the tone for the session, but that's something you can do. You can go into meetings, especially organizing spaces, and say like, what do we need to know going in here? What's our intention? What's our goal? Um, but also just moving about your day. Like you can pull a card and say like, all right, this is where I want to go today. This is how I want to move. This is the the energy I want to embody. You can use tarot cards for affirmations. You can create affirmations around the cards. I keep coming back to temperance, and so maybe the affirmation is, I am balanced. I can hold two truths, right? Whatever it is that you need to remind yourself, right? You can use the card, you can carry a card with you. You can also buy an affirmation oracle deck that'll give you those affirmations, and I think those are really fantastic too. But you can use cards to kind of like set yourself up for success in the day, right? Like I mentioned earlier, creating new spreads is a great way to stay active in a spiritual practice. Just make your own spreads. You don't have to share them with anybody. They can be just yours. You don't even ever have to use them, but just get in the act of like thinking about your cards and how they work together, and allow yourself to deepen your practice in that way. Similar to altars, you can also create a ritual. You can build around a card and say like, all right, I want to, if this is definitely more spiritual, um, like esoteric based, but thinking about if you are more magically inclined and that's part of the practice you want, to build out a whole ritual around your cards and to say, this is what I want in my practice. This is a nightly routine. This is, spell casting, whatever that looks like for you. And of course, individual and community check-ins. Check in with yourself every so often. Do a larger reading for yourself, and say, instead of just the daily draws, maybe you're like, all right, let's do a quarterly check-in, or let's sit down with my organization and do a tarot reading, and check in that way. Right. So there's all kinds of ways that you can build a spiritual practice with tarot. There's lots of options. This is definitely just a limited list. Um, but I encourage you to think about ways that you can incorporate tarot into the daily practice you have, and making time and space for your spirituality and to explore what that looks like and means to you. And if tarot is the tool for you, right? So with that, I want to leave us with a quote here before I get to these questions. Um, Angel Gonzalez, who is an urban farmer, community organizer, all around very cool person, says, we not only have to learn to grow healthy plants, but healthy soil. It starts with you, what you pour in, how you nourish yourself, and what grows from that nourishment will be beautiful. But you have to take the time to care for you and, make the space for it. So, thank you all so much. I'm going to get to the couple of questions, but feel free to drop any more in the Q&A. Here are my references, and here's me. Ignore this QR code. I forgot to pull it out. A couple of questions that I had here. Somebody said, do you read the cards as upright versus reversed? And if so, how do you interpret them? So I actually used to keep an all upright deck. So my um my deck used to, like, I would always straighten it out so that they would never be reversed. And that's a completely valid way to keep your deck. I kept it like that for probably 7 years, because I felt like I didn't need to incorporate reversals because 78 cards covers a lot. I do read reversals now. And reversals are when the card is flipped upside down, and when you pull it and it's flipped upside down. And the way I interpret a reversal, it can be not necessarily the opposite of that card's meaning, but it can be like you're struggling with it a little more. There's like a blockage, um, something that you need to work through a little extra. But you also don't have to read reversals. Like I said, like reversals can complicate things. And if you're not there yet, then don't put pressure on yourself to be there. Um, Somebody asked, where does one go to learn how to read the cards, and what is the process for selecting your first deck? That is a fantastic question. To read the cards, like you can attend stuff like this. You can reach out to me for individual coaching, but also just there are tons of books, there are online resources. Quick Google searches will help you find like more like deeper dives into those. Labyrinthos is a great website, but also just like taking the time to sit with your deck and reading the guidebook that comes with your deck is going to be immensely helpful. As for selecting your first deck, I would recommend doing some research and seeing, if there's particular imagery that you want. Like I wanted decks that involved queer people, and so I looked for those. If there's like exciting time periods or art styles, I have like an Art Deco deck, an Art Nouveau deck. And so you can find, just like start looking, and like I always recommend, even if you go to a store and you see a deck, I will Google the deck and see if people have uploaded pictures of it so that I can see the cards and make sure that it's imagery that I'm gonna enjoy. Um, but also ask around, see who has some cool decks and take some time with them. All right. Um, Somebody says, do people ever report when they draw they tend to live their day the way the card suggests or the way they interpret the cards to say? That's another great question. I think I've not heard any of that, but I wouldn't discount it. I think that if your cards say, like, you might have some challenges today, you might be looking for those things. Um, but also, just I think that if you do catch yourself kind of thinking in that self-fulfilling prophecy way, to either change to like a nightly reflection, or to give yourself the option to say, like, maybe daily draws aren't for me and I need to reflect in a different way. But I think pulling a card at the start of the day to just kind of set the tone for the day can be really helpful. And if you ask a question of, what do I need to know today? What energy do I need to bring in? And asking more targeted questions can help you avoid falling into like seeking out like trouble or anything like that. Um, Wonderful. I see somebody was just gifted a deck. So that's really cool. I love being gifted a deck. I think that it's always exciting to be thought of in that way. Um, but wonderful. Do I have any other questions? I think I covered everything here. Thank you all so much for attending. I think I will pass it back to the Encore folks.
Thank you very much, T, for your knowledge and expertise. I really enjoyed hearing, um, particularly how you marry both spirituality and professional life. I think sometimes that gets conflated in a um, maybe not so healthy way. And so the way that you explained it and brought it all kind of full circle was quite beautiful. So, um, very happy that our attendees of the webinar were able to experience your knowledge. And I just want to thank everyone for attending, and we will see you next week. Goodbye.